Hi, and welcome to the CLI-ALPMA Innovation and Legaltech Week 2021 on-demand program. I'm Kim Wiegand, founder of Julip Advisory, supporting law firms with outsourced BD marketing strategy and management.
And I'm Ben Farrow. I'm a co-founder and the CEO of FirmChecker.com.au, which is Australia's leading professional services review site where you can get reviews from your clients and build your online presence. So this topic is on client-driven evaluation platforms. To jargonize that, if you will, really it's just about getting feedback from your clients and using that as the building block for your client experience program. And a client experience program is really something that you should be having at this point in time, given how competitive the market is becoming. And here we've just got on the screen, if you're watching the recording, just the way client satisfaction as it's manifested in the Net Promoter Score is trending over time. And you can see it's gone from pretty negative experiences with the Net Promoter Score through to some pretty positive experiences in 2020 over a 10-year period. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the Net Promoter Score, essentially what the Net Promoter Score is it's the percentage of your clients who are rating you as 9 or 10 out of 10 in terms of their likelihood to recommend you to other people. And you subtract from that the percentage of people who are rating you 0 to 6, who are your would-be detractors. So if you think of people who are your raving fans who are out there in the marketplace and promoting you to others, bringing in new business, and then you think of the people who are maybe bad-mouthing you or slagging you off in the marketplace, the Net Promoter Score really is a proxy for that force in the market. And as over 80% of professional services business comes from either repeat business or from word of mouth, it really is a proxy for organic growth. And if we just look at this chart here, you can see that on average, this was across big firms in the Beaten Benchmark survey, which is a tracking survey that year on year measures the performance of Australia's largest law firms. You can see it's starting off being a net negative. People are actually tending to lose business through word of mouth if you're taking the Net Promoter Score at face value. And it's become a net positive over time and seen steady improvement. And I just think that this is just an interesting point, Kim, to set the scene. And I know that it's something that you measure in your time in practice and something that you've been actually a driver of. And I thought I'd just get your comments because having worked with Beaten and also collected the high-level data at FirmChecker, I think this is just sort of an interesting high-level picture, but you get to see how it actually is going on the day.
Do you think it's because the increase in, I suppose, positive reviews, do you think because services are being improved, so service levels are becoming more of a focus within firms, or do you think it's just people's propensity to give positive feedback is increasing?
You know, I think that there are a few things driving it, and you do bring up a pretty important point with people's propensity to give positive feedback, because whereas maybe 10, 15 years ago, client reviews weren't the norm, they've become increasingly something that people expect with Google reviews, with TripAdvisor, Zomato, Glassdoor, all of the review platforms out there, indeed FirmChecker, that it is sort of expected from the client that you'll be asked for feedback and reviews at the end of a matter. I think that this is really interesting data though, and sorry, just to sort of backtrack, when people have that expectation, really they're thinking in a fairly bipolar way. So if you think of what the distribution of the reviews look like on FirmChecker, for example, you've got a high number of 9s and 10s and 8s, and then a bit of a gulf. I think some of the most interesting reviews actually come in that sort of 6, 7, 8 range, and then you've got people all the way down at sort of 0. So in a way, people are kind of giving a bit of a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Yeah. Where I draw the distinction though, and where I think you can put good stock in this, is that with the Beaten Benchmarks data, it's done as a truly independent survey, not as a public review. And people are getting the review not from the person who performed the service, but they're getting it actually from an independent research agency, which is Beaton, and being asked for their opinion. And also it is typically the more sophisticated buyers in the market. As I said, it is the clients of the top tier firms who are often general counsel and the like. So I think this data is something that we can definitely have a bit of faith on in terms of the actual improvement of service over time. And sorry, you were about to say something, Kim?
I was going to say, and I suppose that touches on this, the other point around people's propensity. And I know there's some parallels to be drawn between service providers such as law firms and how law firms are asking for feedback and expectations of that, but also with more FMCG or mainstream non-service orientated businesses asking for feedback.
Yeah, for sure. Just for those who aren't familiar, could you potentially clarify FMCG? So
fast-moving consumer goods. So when you purchase something, a product, a food product, etc., Coca-Cola might send you something, etc. So it's just asking. I suppose that consumer is expecting to receive now requests for feedback, as opposed to a law firm client who may not.
Well, that's right. And I think that that's actually part of what's driving the increased competitiveness of client experience, and why it's becoming something that you need to have, not just as a differentiator, but actually to stay competitive. And that is in the consumer markets, people's expectations are raising. That's underlying that is technology that enables this. But you don't have to have significant overhead in order to provide a really good client experience. And we've got the example on screen here with Uber Eats, and a nice little GIF there. But you've got, you put in an order into your app, you immediately sort of see from go to woe, it's been received. The restaurant said they're going to go ahead with it. Your burger's on the grill right now, and then all the way through to having live tracking of where the person's at. Is your expectations are managed from start to finish without any need for human involvement. And we're not there in professional services yet, but you can see why, if people are used to receiving this sort of service in a consumer market, they start to expect that in professional services markets.
So if your client comes and briefs you and they don't hear anything for the next 2 weeks, and then they have to chase and follow up, that's contradictory to how they're expecting their service provided based on experiences with other services.
Yeah, and let's be honest, they're using other services more often. So that's the benchmark that's in their mind. I mean, people are typically getting Uber Eats more than they're using a lawyer, for example. So,
and the law firm's typically much more expensive than your Uber Eats order.
Exactly. While I don't think that necessarily lawyers are in the position where it's as ubiquitous as it is, that's obviously the way that it's going. And you see on screen here, it's getting that way in dentists. And, lawyers do often think, we're professionals. People aren't necessarily in a position to judge our services. They see themselves as in a different category. But I think it's not that much of a leap from, say, dentists, who are also professionals, to providing that kind of experience from the consumer markets to lawyers, where it's becoming more of a professional service. And I came across last year a really good example of a business called Dental 99. And the customer journey there is almost genuinely like what you would see with ordering a pizza, and not in a bad way. That makes it sound cheap, but it's not. You book an appointment, you get reminders of your appointment coming up. When you get to the clinic, you scan in with your QR code, and then your actual dentist comes and greets you. Once you've finished your service, they've got a data room where they upload all of your scans and X-rays, and the map of your teeth with all of your problem teeth, for example, that if you might have any. And then it has sort of reminders of, when you finish the service, it's been 2 hours since you're clean, you can actually start eating now.
Yeah, right.
And then,
so it's almost like they're using technology to make it a personalized service and experience without it being, I suppose, too robotic.
That's right. So it feels personalized, and maybe it's just sort of what I'm used to because I'm sort of increasingly, I guess, I've grown up with all of this, and I buy services online. That's typically how I will shop. I tend to prefer using a booking engine to having to call somebody because then I don't have to wait on hold or anything. But that kind of works for me, and it all seems pretty friendly. And then, of course, Dental 99, clues in the title, a checkup costs $99. So you've got the fixed fee price transparency up front as well.
And it's funny you mentioned the growing up thing. And I think a good point to make here is not only is, excuse me, a significant number of decision makers within in-house counsel or within our clients of a younger age bracket now, it is going to increasingly become more regular for anyone at any age bracket to be using technology. I mean, look at what COVID's done, right? So, I mean, how much more have people turned to booking and doing things online? That's exacerbated a trend anyway. So without saying it's all going tech, I mean, the trend will be, right, that more and more of our engagement with people and service providers is online.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, as you said, it really just has accentuated a trend, which is where the market was probably going to go anyway, but it's brought it forward a few years because everybody's been forced to break out of their normal ways. And I think underlying all of this is actually getting customer feedback, and that loops back to the would-be topic of this session. It is about client-driven evaluation platforms, but the context that that's in is a really quickly shifting market to a technology-driven market, and a personalized, sort of seamless customer experience from making the purchase onwards. And feedback is how you can collect the data and get the information to actually design that service so that it is consistent with your client's expectations, which might not be the same as in other firms or in other industry. But the feedback is really crucial in starting to actually build that.
I'm glad you say that, because a structure that I tend to implement and use as a basis for client experience programs includes that absolute, strong pillar of feedback. And it's that, I suppose, three pieces of a pie, if you like, that all play into each other in my mind. So, the way you service your clients and making sure you're giving them the best service impacts on their engagement and how we engage with them and how we go to market for them. But if we don't then ask them, how was that for you? And then move forward and fix any issues or capitalize on opportunities, it just breaks down. So it's a consistently and constantly evolving and improving, I suppose, focus on service levels and the way we engage, then asking for feedback, and then again, round and round and round it goes. I think that client experience basis that you were mentioning before, it's a bit of a buzzword, isn't it, in terms of client experience is like the new thing, but it is actually quite innovative or it can be quite innovative in the way different firms adopt different focuses, parts of that for their firm. And I think that it comes with a range of opportunities, as well as helping to mitigate risks. And I think that's a really important part that feedback brings to it. So without asking for feedback, you wouldn't understand, what your clients think, their opinion, how they feel about you in a particular service line, what their challenges or their opportunities are that you could be capitalizing on, and their expectations of how you engage with them. I think that's a really big one that people think, we won a new client, or we got on that panel, fantastic. And then start hammering at the client without stopping first and saying, hang on, how do you expect this to look? What service levels do you want to see from us? And I think if you don't ask that question, you can very quickly get 12 months down the line and go, we got no work from them. Why have we got no work from them? Or you do your first 12-month annual client relationship review survey or something, and it comes out with all of these comments that you think, oh gosh, we had no idea. We've been peppering them with intel or whatever it might be, and they wanted none of that. So even that early on expectation setting, I think that really helps to capitalize on opportunities with clients. Also then mitigating risk, and you mentioned before around issues and challenges. If we don't ask clients for that feedback or understand what the barriers are, where we're lacking in service provision, or how they want to be engaged with and how we've been missing the mark, or where they want to be engaged with and we can capitalize on that, and therefore there's growth opportunity within the firm, then we're really missing a really big trick. And I think that post-matter feedback, for example, or that, feedback on service levels is one thing that I think can be a bit of a, people that don't entirely appreciate the value and or the importance of it. I don't know if you find that.
I absolutely do. I was actually doing a webinar not dissimilar to this late last year with an audience of accountants. I think there were 50 of them or so, but we were doing polls here and there just to sort of gauge where people are at in terms of implementing client experience programs. And we said, so how do you know if your clients are unhappy? And I think it was about 45% of them, give or take, said they don't pay their bills. And, this can be a real stopgap against that. I mean, do you really want to wait until clients are refusing to pay you to know if they're not happy? Or maybe it would be better to pick something up earlier, fix the problem, get paid, but also just not lose a client, because it's pretty unlikely that client's coming back if they're so dissatisfied with the service that you're not pay them.
And it's interesting when there's some pretty interesting statistics about the power of client experience. I want to share a couple of those because I feel like sometimes it's statistics and numbers that make you go, oh, wow. In a recent survey, a legal services survey, 80% of lawyers marked that they think their service provision or their services, service levels are above average. 60% of their clients disagreed. So they are going, we're awesome, we're providing the best service, and their clients are saying, no, you're not. And 95% of legal services clients list service delivery as the most important part of valuable legal services. So clients are saying it's the service delivery that, again, drawing parallels, as you were saying before, between non-legal services, if you like, and other types of online services. I've been testing out various CRM systems, online CRM systems, and I won't name the one that I now no longer am using, but I downloaded their free trial, started trying to work it. The very first step didn't work. It took me about 3 hours online just to get someone on their live chat to talk to me and respond, and it kept timing out because they were obviously answering too many. I immediately just went, I'm not bothering with this, cancelled the free trial and went somewhere else, which was smooth sailing, and they were immediately on live chat. And that service provision, now the one I've moved to is actually more expensive than the first one, but actually the service level is what got it. So if I'm saying that, then surely if I was to purchase legal services, it would be the same scenario, and the statistics say that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm again referencing some beaten data that it consistently shows year on year that over 80% of clients will say that they have chosen a more expensive option in the last year. So it really isn't price that's the big driver of purchase decisions. It's an excuse when people say, actually, I'm not going to go with you, but it's often not the underlying reasons, because prospects will lie. And then we've been talking about the risk and in terms of the opportunity and some more data. There was the independent marketing agency Hinge Marketing. They do a lot of research in professional services. They're based in the US, but they do some international research. And the opportunity is that firms who do research their clients on a regular basis through surveys and feedback and the like actually tend to be twice as profitable as those who don't, which is quite a stark number, and they grow much faster as well. And it is just because you can identify opportunities, you can mitigate threats, and you can, see sort of the bigger picture of how you're actually doing and use that as the basis for informing your strategy, because otherwise you're flying blind. So it is really important, and it's not rocket science. And I think sometimes because it is something that's kind of simple, people overlook it, and it's always something that's important, but I can do it later and it's not urgent. But that can compound, and that can be a story that goes on for a lot too long. We do have people who haven't given client feedback for years who then come on to FirmChecker, and that's sort of the first time they're doing it.
One other statistic, which I've got a slide on, but it blew my mind when I learned this. And I think when people think about asking for feedback, I think when I've spoken to partners about saying we should be asking post-matter feedback, 9 times out of 10 they cringe. They look at you like you've got 2 heads, but the numbers don't lie, and they paint an interesting picture. And I want to take you through a scenario of essentially where a firm may not have asked for feedback. So let's take Kate. who used your legal services and she thought you were amazing. Kate will, on average, tell 9 people, you should use ABC Firm because they were awesome. And as we know, word of mouth is one of the most powerful, and recommendations is one of the most powerful forms of marketing. Or Jane. So Jane had a terrible experience with ABC Firm. So on average, Jane will tell 16 people that they were terrible, don't use them. I think that just the difference. People will more readily say when they've had a really rubbish experience versus a positive one, which maybe comes back to your first slide where you saw there was much more negativity, I suppose, in terms of previous scores. People maybe are not as comfortable or maybe becoming more normalized, that we can talk about positive feedback as well. And if we think about that, right, did you know that only 4% of clients will independently communicate a complaint? So only 4%, 4 out of 100 will independently come and say, hey, ABC Firm, that was a bit rubbish. I'm not happy with that, or I'm not happy with my bill, as you're saying before. Can we talk about it? So 96%, 96 of those 100 who had a bad experience won't make a complaint. And 91% of those 96 will never come back. So if you think out of 100, that's 87 who'll never come back to your firm. And on average, that 87 will tell about 1,392 people. So if you're in a small market, if you're in a regional area or a niche area of law, and you don't focus on either service delivery or ensuring that you're checking on service delivery, then immediately you're putting yourself at a disadvantage. Other statistics say that if you were to ask those 100, hey, how did you find that? You won't find everyone will come back, but you get a significant proportion of people who'll come back and say, actually, I wasn't happy. And the net promoter score, et cetera, very clearly will show you where if they're not going to recommend you to someone else, they're not happy with your services, right? So being able to identify those few and then work with them around how can we rectify this. Another survey, a legal service provider survey, said that of the ones they offered monetary compensation to, because there was an error with billing or whatever it might be, there was about 37% of them took that up and said thanks very much and walked away happy. They offered an apology, that jumped to 74%. So just offering an apology in combination with some sort of compensation or whatever. But if you don't know about it, again, how easy is an apology? Yeah. So, that there is some easy ways to rectify challenges, but if you don't know about them, which again comes back to the power of, asking for feedback, because that 87, the lifetime value of that 87 could be thousands and thousands of dollars to your firm.
Yeah, I just want to pause on that point, because something that strikes me as a bit interesting is, do you think that the psychology between not asking for feedback is actually probably the same psychology as not registering a complaint, and that is kind of being a little bit conflict avoidant? And is that your experience in running these sorts of client experience programs?
Yeah, so I think it's varied, but we'll talk a little about challenges later, but about implementation challenges. But it takes a little bit, I think, to get people across the line. I think it takes a little bit to get firms and partners really across the line that asking for feedback is okay. And actually, if you consider how often, if you just pause for a second and think, and you mentioned some examples before, how often are you asked for feedback by other service providers? So often. Text message, well, how was our service? We go to close a chatbot, how was our service? You get out of an Uber, how was your service? Stay at a hotel, maybe not so much this year, but how was your service? How was your stay? It will become increasingly odd and increasingly uncommon for law firms not to ask for feedback. And I've had clients that I've spoken to who've said, this is the first time that anyone from your firm has ever come and spoken to me and asked for feedback. Why? You think, wow, okay, so it's actually becoming normalized that law firms will ask for feedback and that clients expect it because they feel valued. Oh, you want to know how I feel and what I think? Well, actually, they were great, but they weren't so great. Can you fix it, please? And clients are very happy to give both positive, neutral, yes, and negative feedback. And it's the negative feedback a little bit that you need to be obviously capitalizing on, I think, and checking pretty quickly. but it's also a massive engagement tool, I think, if you get positive feedback. When I've had positive feedback and I've tried to be very open with all the positive feedback and sharing that with the fee owners and partners, because once they see that actually people are interested in and want to give feedback and are very happy with service levels, they suddenly become quite buoyed, and their engagements with those clients they've had positive feedback changes and deepens that relationship. So I think it's a bit of a journey.
Yeah, and what are some of the tools that you've used in getting client feedback in both in your times as a consultant and also as well?
So I think it's dependent on a different tool for a different purpose. And I mean, you'll notice, Ben, in terms of when you go out and ask for particular feedback, or sentiment, for example, is a different tool you would use to post matter feedback, which is what these statistics show here. But most recently, I've used the debrief product, which is obviously Beaton's product, which has been fantastic. It's a very simple way of demonstrating data. And they have sort of a debrief light as well, and it can be all automated, which is quite helpful. I've also used SurveyMonkey, which is, again, mostly a free tool, quite easy to use. I've used in-function CRM systems, which have their own survey tool for very quick, simple 3 or 4 questions to gauge that. So use those, as well as obviously in-person feedback, which, again, has not based on a tool, it's based on experience and expertise to have those conversations with clients. But the tooling, I think, to a degree, is not irrelevant, because there are sophisticated, amazing tools out there that are very cost efficient, simple to use, intuitive, etc. It's the function of doing it, I think, is the most important thing.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. And just to add a couple of other tools that came to mind while you're rattling off a couple, my personal favorite for sort of quick bespoke surveys is Typeform. I think that the text that it has for the end respondent is the best. Its drawback is that it's not super powerful in terms of what it enables you to do from a survey design perspective, but for most purposes, it's pretty much fine. And then, there are also other tools out there, Qualtrics, Confirm It, that sort of thing. Yeah. I think they're great for what they do, but unless you're sort of a market research agency doing really complicated surveys with sort of sophisticated needs, it's probably overkill. So I'd kind of look towards those sorts of tools if you are going to DIY. The only thing that I would caution against in DIY is that I think people sometimes underestimate the importance of good survey design and the actual questions, and they'll do things like ask double-barreled questions and have balanced scales. So, a scale where you're rating from 1 to 7 or whatever, but they aren't actually the opposite, or it'll be something with a midpoint. No midpoint. So people who are feeling a bit neutral don't really have a way to go. There are all kinds of little things in survey design which not only take up the time of your people to do it, but which actually do result in a kind of data. So that's just another thing to be mindful of. But there are some really good tools out there for sure that are cost effective.
It's a very good point, actually. I mean, for someone who does a lot of feedback, asking for feedback, etc., in designing the most recent debrief one, and I came up with this range of questions, and I thought they were fantastic. And as soon as the team came back with the feedback, I was like, oh yeah, right, okay. So it is a skill. It is definitely a skill, and it's one that I'd direct you, as you're right, go to the professionals if you want a really well-formed survey.
Yeah, and it's not to say that there's no place for doing it yourself. There certainly is, and like for some forms that are really quick, they'll have pre-built stuff, and you don't need to do a full-on scientific study a lot of the time, but if you are looking to get a bit more precise and there's both the time cost involved and also concerns about survey design, it is worth considering.
In terms of other tooling, obviously FirmCheck is a sophisticated tool. Did you want to just give an example or show a bit about FirmCheck so people can see some of what we're talking about based on a platform you know really well?
Sure, I can share my screen and show just a little bit. I won't sort of do a full demo, but it does have some of the insight that we're talking about. So FirmCheck it's sort of a plug and play end of matter feedback system. What it's not is it's not an onboarding survey yet. We are looking to build that functionality, and it's not sort of relationship level survey. And specifically designed to be something that you ask clients, sort of a pulse at the end of matters. And really it does focus on people's propensity to recommend you through the Net Promoter Score, the key drivers of the Net Promoter Score. So how can you actually improve? Because we've derived through sort of over 10,000 reviews, many more actually, what actually moves the needle on people's willingness to recommend you, to give you a bit more to go by. And it's just sort of a simple, easy to use dashboard, which then both enables you to get private feedback. So clients can indicate they want to leave a private review if they feel more comfortable doing that. A lot do, or a public review so that you can build your online presence and then also have it appearing on your Google My Business profile. And that is really helpful at the point of, converting somebody from should I get in touch with this firm to yes, I will, because they've actually got a demonstrated sort of independently verified client service record. And what we do.
Can I just jump in there, Ben, because that's a really important point. I mentioned it before about recommendation being one of the most powerful forms of marketing. When people are looking for, and this is you'll know this very well, but the sales pipeline, if you like, someone needs a service, they'll think, oh, I need this. Who am I aware of? Oh, I know these firms. Then they'll go, oh, who would I consider for this service? Or I consider these guys. Then they'll go and check them out. And the power of having this kind of feedback, and it's publicly available and, demonstrated online, etc., is that it's a validator. It's a very strong validator. And by being able to demonstrate what other clients are saying will validate that, yes, they're the right one. And it pushes people through the sales pipeline much more quickly than if there's nothing available.
Yeah, and our users have found it huge in that respect. And to that end, we do have widgets that you can embed on your site that have your score, and then also have sort of a live ticker of reviews and things like that. So that's not just, here's my best friend who has asked for a testimonial, but here are some reviews, which is great. This is obviously all dummy data just for sort of demo purposes, but you can see these are some of the insights you get. You get where you're doing well, where there might be recent areas for improvement, the Net Promoter Score. And then also here are some of the key drivers of the Net Promoter Score. So you could say, okay, well, my clients are saying they, more of them than not are saying I would like to recommend this to another person, but what's actually driving that? Well, you can see, okay, well, we're pretty reliable. Our value, maybe we can work on pricing or communication of value a little bit more. And then, so you've got communication here. Okay, so maybe communication and value are the two things that you work on, rather than maybe expertise, which the clients are really happy with, or understanding of your needs, which again, the clients seem to be pretty happy with. And these are, things at the margins, but in terms of prioritizing your effort, it's actually really important to get that client feedback, because if you try and do 5 things at once, then you're probably not going to achieve any of them. But if you have a sort of single-minded, focused drive on the basis of good data, then that can be really helpful. And then likewise, if you've mentioned the sort of the front end component of people being able to see public validation of this firm's expertise, is one thing that we like to sort of see as a differentiator to say a Google review is that you've got not just 5 stars in a comment, you actually get a little bit more granular detail for people who are really considering you. And you actually get to see, demonstrate where you're performing most of your work. And I'm sure that everyone in the legal industry would be familiar with, firms that say we're experts in 15 different practice areas, but then actually 80% of their work is in wills and estates. You can actually sort of cut through that and see where is this firm performing most of its work, and what industries is it serving? Is it serving clients like us? Because they're key drivers of the client purchase decision as well. So I won't go into a full sort of demo or anything, but that's sort of where we come in at the end of matter client feedback point, and also collection of reviews.
Is it fairly self-service, Ben?
Pretty self-service, yeah. I mean, we provide some setup and onboarding support, of course, but it's pretty easy. Like, I mean, we are there, and we do proactively get in touch with people to give them help, but a lot of the time people say, oh no, like they got it. That's
but they don't need it. Because one of the things that strikes me is, particularly for small firms, a lot of it they'll be doing late at night, or they'll be doing, particularly because this is discretionary stuff, right? Because it's all that value added over and above your billables and all the rest of it. You may not have a client experience manager internally to manage that because it's you. So if you can access this and do a lot of it, on weekends or as sole business owners or small firms often do, it's accessible. And it's interesting, again, for small firms, sometimes we don't know when you talk about, you can prioritize. I often get questions from small firms saying, yeah, but do I have to know everything? And do I have to do all of this stuff? And oh my gosh, I haven't got the energy. I don't know where to start. If you can narrow it down to show that your clients are actually saying, you're really rubbish at that, but you're awesome at that. Right, well, we need to focus on this. And for 6 months, put some effort into that. And sometimes you say moving the dial. Sometimes it's a 5%. Do you think sometimes it's a 5%? Let's just focus and improve this, this, and this. It doesn't have to be that full-blown internal program of, service improvement. It might just be better communication about bills.
That's a really important point. And to sort of make it real, I guess, one, these stats are highly correlated. If you lift one, you'll tend to lift the other. But the most common complaint or area of dissatisfaction is in communication across our data. And where that's manifested in the comments is I didn't feel I was kept up to date with the status of my data. That's been improved over the last couple of years, which is interesting. I think that people are becoming better at this. But a really good example was I was consulting with a firm, and I won't say who it was, but they were doing well on everything. On communication, was a bit down. I said, look, if you look at your communication score, it's a bit lower, and the comments indicate that they feel they don't know where their matter is at, and they say, oh, but the thing is that if we communicate with them and let them know, we'll have to bill them for it. It's like, no, you won't. You don't have to do that. It's just a change of life.
Yeah.
That's a problem you can fix, and that will increase the perception of everything else. And it's such an easy fix as well. So, I guess it's sort of a bit of a ready, aim, fire sort of approach rather than a ready, fire, aim approach without the use of data to inform the direction.
And if you don't measure it, you can't manage it, right?
Yeah, that's right.
I was going to share back because I think that probably takes us to, in terms of implementing and going about implementing, because I think often people think that it's just an easy peasy plug and play, which technology-wise it should be. And FirmCheck is a great example to say it doesn't need a technical expert, and you've got good people internally who can, within FirmChecker who can support the process, but you don't need to have a full-time project manager, for example. But there are some challenges and things to consider around any of these client experience or feedback programs. And that's making sure that whether you're a small micro practice or a medium firm or a large firm, that you have an internal champion. And that doesn't necessarily mean just your BD person. You need someone with a bit of clout internally who buys into the concept that, hey, we actually should be asking for feedback of our clients at various stages. So every panel win, we need to have an expectation setting meeting. And at the end of every matter, we need to be saying, here, how was that for you? And I think that internal champion, don't underestimate the power of that. Also, don't underestimate having an internal champion from an administrative perspective. If you're a larger firm, particularly. If you're a smaller firm and yours is a portal, right? So you log in and you can see your data versus mail outs, etc., that come in. And one example, I worked in a firm in the UK who launched an annual survey and sent out letters, going back a few years, sent out letters to all of their clients. Within 2 to 3 weeks, and it had an envelope that people could fill out the survey, and this is how technology has improved things. They'd fold it up and put it back in and send it back. It was just inundated with all of these surveys, like hundreds of them, because they surveyed every client across the firm at once. And so I got bogged down for weeks and weeks and weeks calling clients saying, thank you so much for your feedback. I understand you were unhappy about it. So I became sort of the concierge of that. And that's a very quite onerous process. And the other thing is saying, right, well, what happens when there is some kind of a challenge? So having that process around what do we do when something goes wrong or we have some feedback we're not really happy with. So articulating that process quite early. So if something happens and we get some negative, we get a 5 on our NPS score, what do we do? Do we contact them? Do we not contact them? Do we speak to the partner? Whatever it might be. And getting the partner's buy-in, I think. I mean, I don't know how many clients you have, Ben, where it's the partner you're dealing with, or is it the marketing BD person that you're dealing with?
Depends on the size of the firm. We're primarily a tool for sort of the small to medium firms, but we do find that where it has the most success is where it's got buy-in and championing, if you will, from a partner, from somebody who has a bit of clout in the firm. But then it's delegated, because the thing is that while it is crucial, and the partnership should know that, it's not urgent and it is not necessarily worth the partner's time. It's not necessarily the highest and best use of their time. So in order to get that return on effort, in addition to the return on investment, it is better if it's delegated with, I guess, the blessing of a partner. And then I think there's a further step as well, is that it doesn't mean that you need to delegate to somebody to individually email out every single client. These things are increasingly amenable to automation. So it should be overseen by somebody who is the key point of contact and the person who is in charge of it. But as much as possible, you should automate the actual collection of data, because then you can set and forget and act on stuff as and when it needs to be acted upon, rather than sort of having it to be a chore. Because then it becomes a bit like, it can become a bit like a gym membership, where it's something that you subscribe to with best intentions. You're ready to get huge, you're ready to cut down all of your body fat, but then unfortunately life gets in the way and it goes to the back burner of all the things you want to do. So if you can automate it, you'll get those results without the effort.
Yep. That's a really good point. Just thinking, can you imagine doing a mail out survey, a paper mail out survey nowadays?
When you said that though, I did think maybe you're zigging when other people are zagging, because in a way, if you did a mail out where you've got a QR code, for example, that went.
You're still going technology. I like it.
No, you do. But what I'm saying is that you wouldn't end up in getting lost in someone's inbox. And that goes to another point as well, is do find that people often have a bit more success if they use SMS rather than email for sending out survey requests. And that's just for the simple reason that when you're in the sort of work mode and you've got a big bunch of emails that you can't get lost and put on the back burner, or as SMS
falls down. Yeah, I can see that. Maybe a postcard with a QR code, or something quirky. Yeah, fair enough. Good point.
So maybe it's the right time.
The other thing I think probably is a good one to ascertain from the outset, and this comes with your clear process, is what you do with the feedback in terms of reporting and how you manage that feedback. So keeping in mind that this is a client who is coming back with potentially negative feedback about a very successful partner or owner of a firm's service levels. So that's quite, it's like someone saying, Kim, we're going to go and survey all of your partners and they're going to tell us what they think of your work. I immediately will clam up. So, it's quite a sensitive thing. So making sure as you're delivering feedback and giving feedback, you're doing it in a really sensitive way. We did have some feedback through the debrief product that was about a very good client of the firm. Where the firm thought they were doing really well with this particular client. And the commentary that came back, whilst they scored quite well in terms of service delivery, the commentary that came back was damning of one particular individual, and that they were, very egotistical and blah, blah, blah. Now, they were just a junior at the time, but very quickly swapping that person out. But it was managing that so that it didn't completely knock the confidence of the junior, but trying to coach them around how they change their behaviour and interacting with clients. So had we not known that, it could have potentially damaged a long-term relationship. So it's just managing the delivery of feedback internally as well, and how you report back the statistics and data, I think is pretty key. And you've obviously got a lot of reports, etc., and pie charts, etc., which is quite nice and easy visualised to see, rather than having to trawl through pages and pages of data.
Yeah, for sure. You can see the high level, and then also to the extent that you want to drill down onto individual comments to sort of get a more granular view of how individual relationships are going. And that's an important point. These are about relationships, and you don't want to depersonalize it too much with just sort of looking at the high level insights, but the comments are really important and worth paying attention to for that exact reason. Because as you said, there's an instance where you've got people giving, I don't know, presumably 9s and 10s for things, but then they've actually got some comments where, you need to act on if you're going to keep them happy. So that was a really interesting point.
Mm. And then the final point, really, and this is I think a good one, but you need to celebrate feedback, and you want to talk through this one.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think that it is really about creating that culture of client service and the culture of feedback, and that, good, bad, or ugly, you need to celebrate it, because it's always better to know than to not know. Maybe it's not for your ego in the moment, but I think most people, when they're in a reflective state, would rather know if somebody's not happy or than not know. And basically all of these things, are an opportunity. So, if you've got positive reviews, that's awesome. It's an opportunity to motivate your staff. It's an opportunity to potentially follow up for referrals if it's that type of client who you feel comfortable doing that with. If it's neutral, if it's positive and negative, you can come up with new service lines. And we've actually had users who have started whole new service lines on the basis of feedback had from clients, which is great. And then, where there are issues, you can fix them. Whether that's saving a client from walking out the door who might have been a source of income, or whether it's, on a systemic level, we've got, our clients feel like in that example before that they're not being communicated well with respect to regular updates of their matter. Okay, well, how can we automate that? How can we sort of brainstorm as a team how people, without us having to do any more real work, feel like they always know what the status of their matter is and like they're not being left in the dark? Because bringing it back to what you said before, people do care most about the service levels. They care about that because most of the time they're not necessarily in a position to judge your expertise, and indeed they do take it for granted. So they see your degree on the wall. You're working for a law firm, right? You're called a lawyer. I know that you're a lawyer and not senior associate or partner. I don't really know what that necessarily means, but I do know how you make me feel and whether I feel confident that the matter's in your hands. Underlying that is communication, and using client feedback to actually inform that you can make better decisions about where you do try to improve things. So I think it's all an opportunity and something that's definitely well worth implementing, because, for a relatively trivial cost, it's something that can pay huge dividends. I don't know if that's been your experience, but
yeah. And overall, I think if nothing else, when people who've watched this hopefully are watching it for a reason, right? That they're, apart from just listening to us chatter, but you're watching it because you have some interest in this, or you think there's an area that you can implement or do something within your firm. And from my experience, there has never been any horrendous negatives from asking for feedback. There has only ever been positives. And that's not just for me, I mean, for the firm that I've worked with, and I've implemented so many different kinds of feedback programs, different guises of feedback programs, but there's only ever been positives. So if nothing else, my recommendation would be just to try it, to give it a go, do a test if you like, dip your toe if you're really uncomfortable, give Ben or I a call. Here we go, there's our details. Give us a call if you did want to talk about it within your firm, because I think there's so much benefit to be gained. And keeping in mind the way the market's going, as Ben was saying earlier, it is going to become increasingly uncommon for any service provider not to be asking their clients for feedback. So try not to be the exception in this case. Try to be the rule. That would be my recommendation.
Yeah, for sure. And to that end, we do have free trials on the platform and free versions of it, so that if it is a smaller firm and maybe you don't need the full suite of services, you can still actually get that feedback. And even if it's only used for a couple of months, most people stay on, which is awesome. But you still get that data and you get some information that's good to go with and good for a reset and prioritization of opportunities. But yeah, I think that's just about a wrap, Kim. But yeah, to everyone who has watched and persisted this far, we hope you've enjoyed the session. If you'd like to receive updates about the work of ALPMA or CLI, then do follow them on LinkedIn, Facebook, or Twitter. Likewise, speaking for myself, and I'm sure speaking for Kim as well, do feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn and get in touch.
Sounds good. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, Kim. Cheers.
Cheers.